What's something that feels fake but is 100% real? A smartphone. Go back, say, 500 years and tell someone that a single hunk of metal, glass, plastic, and minerals mushed into a brick that can be used to communicate with other humans, show unlimited entertainment, provide you with all information known to mankind, can be used to deliver food or alcohol to your door, or summon a metal box to pick you up and travel to places. It can also send money and receive money, turn off and on lights, be used to gamble, and basically manage almost every aspect of your life. Yeah, that works, and we use it to argue with strangers and look at pictures of cats. Story 2. It takes light 4.24 years to get from Earth to our closest neighbor star, Proxima Centauri. The fastest vehicle ever constructed by humans, Voyager 1, travels at 10.5 miles per second. At that speed, a flight from New York to London would take 5 minutes, and at that speed, it would still take almost 75,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. Story 3. Oh boy, a lot of stuff related to taxonomy, LOL. Seals are more closely related to weasels than they are to whales. Woodlice are closer to barnacles than to beetles. The platypus, that's it. There's a bird that lives in the jungle and eats leaves. The leaf diet makes it fart a lot, so it's extremely stinky. When it hatches, it has claws and it's perfectly able to move around, so when predators approach the nest, the chick can jump into the water, swim around for a bit until the threat is gone, and then climb back up, using its claws to grip to branches. Story 4. One of Bruce Lee's movies has a scene that mirrored the way his son Brandon Lee actually passed away. Bruce pretends to be terminated after being fired at by an assassin on a film set. Brandon Lee passed away on the set of The Crow after an accidental firing. Both passed away during the production of their 5th film, and both became famous because of their passing during the films that ended up becoming very tragic marketing for the movie, similar to Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, who, by coincidence, was the same age as Brandon Lee when he passed away. Supposedly, it's worse for your oral health if you brush your teeth immediately after throwing up versus waiting 15 to 30 minutes. Hard to believe, and I've been waiting years for this to be debunked, but that's the going info on the internet right now. The science behind it is that the acid in your stomach weakens the enamel on your teeth, and your toothbrush can brush it away. The best practice is to rinse with water and baking soda right away to neutralize the acid, but still wait the 15 to 30 minutes to brush. Story 6. Speaking from experience, every chronically ill person has a scary story about a healthcare provider mistreating them or neglecting them. We see countless medical providers in our lifetimes as chronically ill patients. You would think that the majority of our experiences are good. They aren't. Every time I see someone new, it's about a 50-50 gamble on whether they'll be the best provider I could have ever hoped for, or the absolute worst who will make your life even more of a living hell than it already is. Story 7. As a DJ, real-time stem separation. If you had told 12-year-old me 30 years ago that I'd be able to literally remove, filter, and apply effects to vocals, instruments, drums, etc. from any track I had, I would have literally lost my mind. It's simply magic. I don't understand exactly how it does it, and I don't care how it does it, but it made mixing and blending tracks become so much more exciting for me. I literally feel like I did when I first learned how to just mix 2 tracks together on a pair of turntables. It's that exciting. Story 8. Honestly, space. Everywhere that humans naturally live is a tiny speck of existence, a small rock we can't exist outside of without significant help. In just our solar system alone, there is an unfathomably massive ball of fire that warms our entire planet and gives life. And it's not the only giant fiery ball. Everything out there is older than ancient, and so far that we are looking at things long gone when we are staring at the sky. And black holes? What kind of magic is that? Story 9. There are some strange-looking animals out there who look like they could have been made with AI. Long-eared jerboa, a mouse-sized rodent with very large ears and a long tail that hops like a kangaroo and has little T-Rex arms. Cyclocosmia ricketi, aka the Oreo spider, a trapdoor spider whose abdomen shape and pattern looks like an Oreo cookie or rusted ancient coin. A maned wolf looks like a fox with elongated stilt-like legs. Tailless whip scorpion, a kind of cross between a scorpion, a spider, and a spider, so weird looking one was used as a monster in the Harry Potter series. Handfish, small fish that use their pectoral fins to walk along the ocean floor, sometimes seeming to use them to cling to seagrass. Chevrotain, aka a mouse deer, tiny deer only growing to about a foot high. Tree kangaroo, a species of kangaroo that is adept at living in trees, looks like a cross between a kangaroo, a sloth, and a bear. A fennec fox, small sandy-colored fox with oversized ears. Lobster moth caterpillar, larvae have adapted to appear to have the head and thorax of an ant, complete with 4 quote-unquote legs. Story 10. For me, it's Pangea. I understand that it's a scientific fact. I know that people far smarter than me have figured the history of the Earth out. I still can't wrap my head around it though, like all of the world's continents fit together because they used to be one landmass. And over an amount of time that my brain can't fathom, they drifted apart until the world looks the way it does now. It's baffling to me. It sounds so absurd and fake, even though I know it isn't. Story 11. To me, as a kid born after 2000, old school record players blew my mind. I just accept phones as I'm not smart enough. It wasn't until I heard an explanation for the initial versions. You sang into the bowl-shaped part, the vibrations of the metal moved the needle in a precise way and made indentations and grooves. Then the needle, when moved along the original track marks, vibrated the bowl part in the same way, and it produced a sound that initially made the vibrations. Story 12. Dragonflies live most of their life underwater. The female lays eggs in water. When the eggs hatch, they spend months to years, depending on the species, underwater swimming, and are a top predator until they walk out of water and, in place, moments after exiting the water, molt their exoskeleton and fly off. The world is such a mystery. Like, how do we, as humans, have to be taught most things in life from a baby, but all other living things in the world know exactly what and how and where instinctively? Like, how do emperor penguin males know to sit on the egg the female just birthed so it doesn't freeze? And how do they know how to waddle and protect the egg while she's hunting for herself? But they just know the female is going to go hunt for months, trek tens of hundreds of miles round trip, and eat enough so that, miraculously, when the baby penguin is born within days, the mom knows how to get back exactly where they are and have weeks worth of food in a separate pocket of the penguin's body that it just sits in, separate from their normal stomach that processes and digests for herself and regurgitates it into her baby's mouth for months until the process starts all back over from mating to egg. Sorry for the rant, the world just blows my mind every day. But also, human to human, if someone hasn't told you yet today, I love you and I'm glad you're here living just like the rest of us. Story 13. Poisonous forever chemicals were created by two manufacturers, well, mainly 3M and DuPont, and now exist in nearly every single living creature on the planet because they dumped it in our drinking water and kept it secret. They knew it was ending animals and was poisonous to humans, but they carried on dumping it for decades. It has been widely found that many water systems and environmental sites have PFAS pollution levels significantly higher than recommended or proposed safety levels, and yet more and more PFAS is still finding its way into our water supplies. Story 14. A small population of mammoths were alive during the time Egyptians were constructing the Great Pyramid of Giza. Mammoths vanished nearly 1,000 years after the Great Pyramid was completed. After mass extinction, approximately 10,000 BCE, some mammoths survived on Wrangel Island off Siberia's coast until about 1650 BCE. The first Egyptian kingdom began around 2686 BCE. Story 15. How weirdly programmable your brain is, because if you decide that every time you touch a doorknob you think one specific thought, like, I am not checking my phone right now, within a week your brain starts firing that thought automatically before you even notice, and with a few tiny repeated cues like that, you can actually tilt your mood, cravings, and confidence in ways that feel like a cheat code even though it is just your very real, squishy hardware rewiring itself on schedule. Story 16. Donald Trump. Seriously, I'm 48 and the first time he ran for president, I legit thought the world had been completely pod-peopled and I was the lone human left. The schmucky dude who is basically a terrible human, from grabbing to pageant peeping to the Central Park 5, that dude? Okay, so double impeach and was basically the worst president ever? Cool. And then, again? No, I refuse to believe this is real life, that we're this stupid and hateful. Story 17. Benign paroxysmal positional vertigo is the most common type of vertigo. Symptoms are repeated brief periods of vertigo with movement characterized by a spinning sensation upon changes in the position of the head. The underlying mechanism typically involves a small calcified otolith moving around loose in the inner ear. In Swedish, we call it the crystal sickness. It reads like it was invented by a sloppy scriptwriter to quickly disable a character with no long-term effects. Like, seriously, a loose rock in your ear? Story 18. There is no one singular now throughout the universe. Places that are apart in distance are disconnected in time in both directions by an amount equal to the amount of time it would take light to travel to that distance. For example, we don't know what things are happening over in Alpha Centauri, but something is happening over there. There are planets and time is passing there. If we mark some point in time over here on Earth, the stroke of midnight, say, on January 1, 2026, no one could say what's happening at the same time in Alpha Centauri, And not only because we don't have any cameras there, no one can say what's happening at the same time in Alpha Centauri, because there is a roughly 8-year window of time over there, which all have an equal claim to occurring at the same time as a stroke of midnight. Different observers traveling at different velocities would observe events which occurred there happening many years before the stroke of midnight or many years after the stroke of midnight, and all observers would be equally correct. This is not a result of an optical illusion. The order of events between places apart in space cannot be placed into an objectively correct order, only a subjectively correct order. Story 19. It's possible that the US has beaten the USSR to space by accident. After the end of World War II, the US had been conducting a bunch of nuclear tests. One of them was named Pascal A, and it was meant to test the effectiveness of subterranean nuclear explosions. Workers dug out a tunnel into the ground, and the nuke was put at the bottom. Upon activation, a very tall jet of fire could be seen coming from the hole. The test was redone, named Pascal B. The hole was deeper, it was sealed with a 900 kilogram steel lid, and a high-speed camera, for that time, the early 1950s, was pointed at the hole. The camera took a photo every millisecond. Upon activation, a similar jet of fire could be seen, but after the dust settled, the cover was just gone, nowhere to be seen. In fact, it appeared on one frame. The speed necessary to achieve this was calculated to be at least 66 kilometers per second, which is roughly 6 times the speed necessary to leave Earth, 11.2 kilometers per second. If by any chance the cover survived the atmosphere, it is the farthest away man-made object by a noticeable portion of a light year. Story 20. There's a pill that gets prescribed to prevent nightmares, and, well, it works. With PTSD-style nightmares, your BP and heart rate go up disproportionately and create a feedback loop with your brain. If you don't already take a BP medication, a very low dose of prazosin before bed can keep that feedback loop from starting. I take a nightmare pill is the fakest sounding thing I've ever said, but it's true. I'm not a paid promoter, but if they want to give me a year's supply, you know? Story 21. In the United States, under interagency agreements governing wildland fire response, wildland fire helicopters transporting medical waste, then calling supplies back from a remote medic station or tent used to treat firefighters, having biohazardous waste including needles, gauze, saturated with red liquid, etc., packed into a net dangling from the helicopter. Do not have to have it labeled as medical waste. So you could have a helicopter with a sling load beneath it and a porous net with a bag of frickin' mystery items, including syringes or gauze or needles contaminated with Hep B or HIV, etc., and it may not be labeled as such. Story 22. The Planck length, the smallest unit of size in physics below which, as far as we know, nothing can exist, is so small that if you imagine it 1 meter in size, an actual meter would be billions of times the size of the observable universe in comparison. In other words, if a meter were the size of the observable universe, even the strongest microscope still wouldn't be able to see the Planck length. Sagittarius A, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, is only about 1/7 the size of the distance between Earth and the Sun, yet it holds a galaxy of billions of stars together. Story 23. I don't know. I guess I think about ending it all pretty frequently, and why not? Like, what's so great about living? You know when I'm happy? For about 5 seconds in the morning when I first wake up, before I remember who I am and what my life is all about, anxiety, disappointment more often than not. I just don't know if there's an afterlife, but who cares? Nothingness couldn't be any worse than this meaninglessness march through my empty days. Story 24. Here's a fun one you can do with quarters. If you set a pair of quarters on a flat surface touching, how many times do you think one coin will rotate around the other? You see, I figured one time off the cuff because the edges are the same circumference. It turns out that the quarter rotates twice as you roll it around, except if you do the same thing while observing from the center coin, the outer coin only appears to do a single rotation instead of 2. It doesn't match what your intuition says should happen, but it is real. Story 25. This sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's completely real. Andy Marr and Jordano Ventura, both Dominican MLB players who passed away on the exact same day, January 22, 2017, in separate car accidents in the Dominican Republic. Marte's car crashed into a house, while Ventura's accident was a high-speed crash that ended him instantly. Both had played for the same Dominican Winter League team and were back home during the MLB offseason. The coincidence is just wild. Same country, same team, same day, same type of accident. You'd think something like this would blow up as a huge story, but for some reason it mostly passed by without much fanfare. Story 26. If you were to drive from Boston, Massachusetts to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, it's 308 miles. If you were to drive from Boston to Manhattan, 212 miles. If you were to drive from Manhattan, New York to Washington, D.C., 228 miles. The distance between Manhattan and the International Space Station, the ISS, is about 250 miles. This distance is not constant as the ISS maintains an orbital altitude that can range from approximately 205 to 270 miles. So at times, it's longer to drive than it is to go to space. Story 27. Actually, it is not proven to be 100% real, but the scientific consensus is we needed nothing but a freaking steam engine, which is not that complicated by the way, to develop from a race of peasants who burned witches to a space-traveling society in the blink of an eye. However, we are supposed to be the first society of that kind while human beings exist in that form for like 200,000 years. Story 28. Cleopatra lived closer to the launch of the iPhone than the building of the pyramids. During the last ice age, there were giant cave bears and sloths weighing up to 7 tons, the size of a grown African bull elephant. They lived across North America, and the bears definitely ended the humans. Dogs were domesticated several thousand years before any other species, plant or animal. They walked across the land bridge with us already domesticated. Story 29. The U.S. is the most imperialist state of the modern era, but most Americans still think they're the heroic good guys. Some wild but verifiable facts. The U.S. has invaded or militarily intervened in almost 70 countries as of 2025. The U.S. dropped more bombs on Laos and Cambodia during the Vietnam War than all sides dropped in World War II, even though both countries were not even part of the war. The U.S. is a big reason why Iran doesn't have a democracy. Iran's democracy was overthrown with CIA backing to protect Western oil interests. Many of the dictatorships in South America, including Pinochet and Chile, were supported or enabled by the U.S. The U.S. still has military bases in like 70 countries, more than any empire in history. Story 30. Around the 1680s in France, it became fashionable to wear bandages around your butt in order to pretend that you had surgery done on it. King Louis XIV had a butt fistula that needed to be operated on to fix, and when it was successful, people began faking it and going to surgeons even when they didn't have the condition. People who couldn't get it done just used bandages to mimic it. The surgeon who was in charge practiced for 6 months on over 70 people beforehand, none of whom had that condition. And even before doing that surgery practice, he attempted other remedies like special baths or drinks on another group, none of whom had that condition either. Apparently, the only ones present for the surgery were the surgeon, 4 doctors, his war minister or chancellor, don't recall the exact title, and his commoner mistress. His war minister held his hand for the duration of the surgery. For more fun facts like this, check out the podcast No Such Thing as a Fish. Great podcast, really, really funny, and it's one of the highlights of my week. Story 31. The saying, money doesn't buy you happiness, people often read into the surface of the sentence and disregard it but aren't aware of the research behind it. Money does not buy us happiness after reaching a certain threshold, 73,000 USD a year last time I read. But with time, I'm sure with the time, the amount has inflated. After we fulfill our basic psychological needs through money, money is unlikely to buy us happiness. So subjectively, it might not be true for a lot of people, but objectively, the statement, money doesn't buy you happiness, is likely to be correct. Story 32. McDonald's in Brazil has kiosks that only sell ice cream. Part of the reason is that McDonald's has to compete with Bob's Burgers, which is the biggest burger chain in Brazil. Bob's is well known for its Ovaltine shakes, and Brazil has the world's second largest Ovaltine market next to Thailand. Brazil's Ovaltine is super good because of a manufacturing defect that makes it crispier than other countries' Ovaltine. Because Bob's Burgers has dessert-only kiosks, McDonald's does the same to compete with them. Story 33. This has become more properly known in the past few years, especially since Mythbusters covered it, but it's still my favorite. You are a contestant on the show Let's Make a Deal. Monty Hall has provided you with 3 doors with a grand prize behind just one of them. You choose door number 2. Monty then reveals that door number 1 had nothing behind it, so the prize is definitely behind either door number 2 or door number 3. You are then given a chance to switch your answer. Do you switch? Most people won't switch, going with their gut instinct. After all, it is a 50-50 chance. Turns out it's not actually a 50-50 chance, and your chance of winning is actually greater if you do switch doors. Story 34. This is my go-to weird fact. When it became apparent that it was incredibly difficult to harvest spider silk, which is prized for its strength, a string of silk the width of a pencil from some spiders can stop a jet mid-flight. Scientists created spider-goat hybrids that produce the spider silk protein in their milk, which can then be refined into genuine spider silk. They are essentially goats with spider DNA. And the scientists in charge of them call them the spider goats. There are clips from documentaries about them on YouTube, and there are many articles on the topic elsewhere. Alright, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 35. Male anglerfish were only recently discovered. Every specimen ever collected before was found to be female, baffling the scientists. Then they finally found the males as boils on the side of the females. Male anglerfish are roughly 1/30th the size of the females, and when they find a female, they bite onto her side. The female releases an enzyme that slowly dissolves the male's body while creating veins to it, keeping it alive. Eventually, all that remains of the male are his testes fused to the side of the female for future use. Bonus in the game Banjo-Tooie for the N64, there is an anglerfish as a boss, Lord Wu Fakpak, and at one point in the battle, you destroy his precious boils. Story 36. A neutron star is tiny compared to most stars, but a spoonful of its matter could weigh up to 8 trillion tons. Matter is made up of 99% empty space in its normal state. Lightning can arc many, many miles in front of a thundercloud appearing to strike from blue skies. Old diesel engines can reignite after being switched off. Blue whales are the loudest animals on Earth and produce a sound at 180 decibels dB, which is almost twice as loud as a jumbo jet taking off at full power. Decimals are a logarithmic scale. Eddie Van Halen caused an electrical fire in the studio when recording the guitar solo to Beat It by Michael Jackson. If you jumped into a pit of lava, you would float initially. If you could persuade them, all of the people in the world could fit on the Isle of the Wight in the English Channel. The probability of flopping a royal flush in Texas Hold'em poker is roughly 1 in 650,000, the best possible hand. The Vikings traded as far west as Canada and as far east as Persia. Batteries were invented thousands of years ago. Hops, humulus, used in brewing, are related to the plant and share the same genus, family. Story 37. We have a joke in Finland. It translates roughly to, "Your Jaeger is the most ecological product in the world. It breaks down immediately when introduced to the woods." This is quite true. I was doing my mandatory military service back in 2006. We were camping in the woods for an exercise. It was minus 22 degrees Celsius. My gear was wet because we put the tent in the wrong place and melted all the snow in it. Our food was terrible and all my platoon mates were awful to me, so I had no friends to complain about all of it. I started losing it that evening when everything just piled on and weighed me down on a mental level. This one big dude from another company, whom I didn't know, saw me almost crying and came over and just gave me a big manly hug. He held me until I calmed down and just went back to his own platoon. That hug gave me the strength to push through that weekend. Thanks, random battle buddy. I will always remember you. Story 38. There is no evidence to find Kavanaugh guilty of the allegations. No testimony from Dr. Ford is not enough. No, it doesn't matter if you found it so genuine and she's so brave. No, there are no witnesses that will say they saw him do it, only that they heard about it. No, you can't prove he committed perjury, just like you can't prove she committed perjury. No, democracy is not gone. Just because you didn't get to block him doesn't mean democracy is gone. No, all those signatures will not get him impeached. Kavanaugh will be in the Supreme Court for the rest of his life or until he breaks a rule during his tenure at the SC. Seeing as he had a spotless career as a federal judge before the Democrats wanted to smear his name, I don't think he'll make any mistakes to get him impeached. Story 39. Just the fact that because of the finite speed of light, everything you see is in the past. If the sun was to hypothetically disappear right now, we wouldn't know until 8 minutes and 20 seconds later, because when you look at the sun, you're seeing what it looked like 8 minutes ago. Also, the Pillars of Creation, which is part of the Eagle Nebula, is approximately 3,000 light years away from us. It was destroyed 2,000 years ago, but we won't see its destruction for another 1,000 years. If you look at it in a telescope, you're seeing what it looked like 3,000 years ago. The finite speed of light essentially lets us see color photos of the far past. Story 40. There are parts of India where people still don't have a bathroom or toilet in their house. Recently, a barely 25-year-old couple got married. It was a love marriage, not an arranged one. It turns out the guy didn't have a toilet in his house. The girl leaves the very next day. The guy tries to negotiate, but the girl doesn't agree. The guy gets filled with grief due to this and ends it all. I'm not making this up. It was in the news. So, pro tip, always check if the guy has a toilet in his house if you are planning to get married. Story 41. I've been watching a lot of Fact Fiend lately, so here's several. The TV show Police Squad was literally canceled after one season because it was too funny and executives were worried viewers wouldn't be able to keep up with all the jokes. The sound effect for velociraptors are turtles being intimate. The guy who made the shredder got the idea while doing sick kung fu moves in his kitchen with cheese graters in his arms. Michael Jackson could never read sheet music, he was just really good enough to sing all his songs perfectly from memory. Remember that flag that the Apollo astronauts planted on the moon? Yeah, that fell over immediately after they left, and NASA refused to acknowledge it for decades because they were salty about it. Colonel Sanders was a real dude who always wore the white suit, and he hated KFC chicken because it was a cheap, easier to make knockoff of his supposedly amazing chicken recipe. He'd literally go into KFC's and show the employees how to make his OG recipe, and KFC ended up suing him for this. Lastly, there's a 20-foot-long crocodile in East Africa named Gustav, and he's terminated over 300 people purely because he enjoys hunting us. Also, the few soldiers that have survived seeing him have claimed that he's frickin' bulletproof. Literally, the only thing people can do to stop him from attacking is throw a few grenades to scare him off. Story 42. Most buildings in the US don't have a 13th floor. 1 in every 100 people in the world have a little bit of Genghis Khan in them. Mongolia, a landlocked nation, has a navy. Most people of European descent, chances are you have some of William the Conqueror's genes. The first automobile was created in 1769. Ice cream has been around since before the 1st century. Engines and batteries are actually ancient inventions. Electric cars have been around since the 1800s. Story 43. The main reason pirates wore eye patches was to be able to adjust their vision for the darkness or low light, not just because they got injured or wanted to look tough. It takes our eyes, on average, 30 minutes to adjust to the darkness after being exposed to light. However, if your eye is already acclimated to the dark, you can see instantly. So for example, if a pirate ship was under attack, and a pirate needed to go to the lower level to fight, they would switch their eye patch from one eye to the other. If the one eye that originally wore the eye patch had been covered long enough, it could give the pirate the upper hand when fighting in the darkness. Story 44. Koalas? Let me tell you about koalas. So, koalas are terribly behaved animals. They have one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any mammal. Additionally, their brains are smooth. A brain is folded to increase the surface area for neurons. If you present a koala with leaves plucked from a branch laid on a flat surface, the koala will not recognize it as food. They are too thick to adapt their feeding behavior to cope with change. In a room full of potential food, they can literally starve. This is not the mark of an animal that is winning at life. Speaking of stupidity and food, one of the likely reasons for their primitive brains is the fact that in addition to being poisonous, eucalyptus leaves, the only thing they eat, have almost no nutritional value. They can't afford the extra energy to think. They sleep more than 80% of their lives. When they are awake, all they do is eat crap and occasionally scream like something terrible. Because eucalyptus leaves hold such little nutritional value, koalas have to ferment the leaves in their guts for days on end. Unlike their brains, they have the largest hindgut to body ratio of any mammal. Many herbivorous mammals have adaptations to cope with harsh plant life taking its toll on their teeth. Rodents, for instance, have teeth that never stop growing. Some animals only have teeth on their lower jaw, grinding plant matter on bony plates in the tops of their mouths. Others have enlarged molars that distribute the wear and break down plant matter more efficiently. Koalas are no exception. When their teeth erode down to nothing, they resolve the situation by starving because they're terrible animals. Being mammals, koalas raise their joeys on milk, admittedly one of the lowest milk yields to body ratios. There's a trend here. When the young joey needs to transition from rich, nourishing substances like milk to eucalyptus, a plant that seems to be making it abundantly clear that it doesn't want to be eaten, it finds it doesn't have the necessary gut flora to digest the leaves. To remedy this, the young joey begins nuzzling its mother's anus until she leaks a little diarrhea, actually fecal pap, slightly less digested, which he then proceeds to slurp on. This partially digested plant matter gives him just what he needs to start developing his digestive system. Of course, he may not even have needed to bother nuzzling his mother. She may have been suffering from incontinence. Why? Because koalas are heavily affected by chlamydia. In some regions, infection rates reach 80% or higher. This issue is made worse by the fact that koalas often display aggressive mating behaviors which further spread the infection. Despite being seasonal breeders, males seem to either not know or care or will simply overpower a female, regardless of whether she is ovulating. If she fights back, he may drag them both out of the tree, which brings us full circle back to the brain. Koalas have a higher than average quantity of cerebrospinal fluid in their brains. This is to protect their brains from injury should they fall from a tree. An animal so thick it has its own little built-in special ed helmet. I terribly dislike them. Story 45. There is no federal minimum drinking age in the U.S. Instead, the federal government extorted the states in order to have each state raise theirs to 21 or face a 10% penalty to their highway budgets, which has since been lowered to 8%. The reason why they changed the law is because after the voting age was lowered by the 26th Amendment, a lot of states lowered their drinking age to 18, citing that as the new age for adulthood. Then they noticed over the next 15 years an increase of motor vehicle fatalities due to drivers driving while intoxicated. Most states raised it again, but Congress wanted to take action to prevent further loss of life. So they wrote and enacted with President Reagan the Federal Minimum Drinking Age Act of 1984. South Dakota challenged them, calling them out on the extortion, but the Supreme Court upheld the act, stating no rights were violated. But since the act didn't directly restrict drinking age itself, instead extorting states to raise their drinking ages, there is technically no federal minimum. Story 46. The gender pay gap, as presented by the media, isn't due to business owners paying women less. The most egalitarian countries are showing that gender differences increase, not decrease. Global warming is due to natural warming and human population, and we may not be able to do anything about it. The Devil's Triangle is a quarters game. Ha ha ha's. He meant it involves putting quarters in your urethra. Story 47. Horses and cloned mammoths may save the world from a runaway greenhouse effect. Explanation. The scientist Sergei Zimov tries to recreate a Pleistocene ecosystem in a park in Yakutia, Russia. He thinks big grazing animals such as horses and bison mitigate the methane thawing in the tundra. According to the theory, they search for grass beneath the snow and reduce the snow coverage. Less snow coverage means less isolation of the ground and therefore a deeper freeze in winter. The deeper frozen ground needs more time to unfreeze in the summer months. This shrinks the time window in which methane thawing could occur in summer. As a side effect, the ecosystem could also get more productive and therefore a better carbon sink. Methane thawing from melting permafrost soil is one of the great risks of a warming climate. It could lead to a runaway greenhouse effect. Until Korean scientists succeed in cloning mammoths, he is recreating the effect of grazing mammoths through driving around with a tank to tear down bushes and trees. Story 48. In 1932, the Australian Army fought emus in a war. Emus won. Iran arrested 14 squirrels on suspicion of espionage. A ball of glass will bounce higher than a ball of rubber. Neil Armstrong had to go through customs and immigration upon returning from the moon. The founder of Match.com lost his girlfriend to a guy she met on Match.com. Saudi Arabia imports camels from Australia. Nintendo started while the Ottoman Empire still existed. A cloud typically weighs over 1 million pounds. Australia once lost their prime minister and couldn't find him. Charlie Chaplin lost a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. Eagles mate midair. Story 49. All the gold on the surface of the Earth isn't from Earth. Gold is thought to be formed from supernova nucleosynthesis and the collision of neutron stars. All the heat and pressure cause it to form from other elements. During Earth's conception, this happened and set most of the gold and other heavy elements to sink to the core while it was still in its fresh, molten state. The gold that's accessible on Earth's surface and accessible depths of the crust is believed to be from the Great Bombardment period 4 billion or so years ago. Chunks of rock cast off from other planets being formed smashed into the surface, and those chunks of rock contain gold that was a byproduct of other planets being formed. The gold we have access to is quite literally from another planet. Story 50. Someone should have, probably said this already. Whenever I do, I get weird responses like nobody can believe it. Nature provides all things for free. You freaking sheltered Reddit people, gosh darn it. Money is a product of cities because cities are inhospitable environments for life. Where does all life come from, you ask? Out in the country, where no one pays the trees to grow or the crops to grow, they just do it for free. Sure, you'll get more, bigger, sweeter produce if you till the soil, or if you add fertilizer, or if you water, or if you add herbicide and pesticides, but some will still grow entirely for free. Nature gives it all away. Story 51. You are about 10 times as likely to pass away in a car accident on the way to purchase a lottery ticket as you are to win the jackpot. There are about 30,000 automobile accidents involving fatalities each year. Americans spend about 17,600 minutes each year driving. There are about 220 million drivers on the road. That translates to about a 1 in 100 million chance of passing for every minute spent driving. The big games have a 1 in 300 million chance of winning the jackpot. If you drive for approximately 3 minutes to get the ticket, you have an approximately 1 in 30 million chance of dying. Story 52. If you were to put a rope around the Earth, it would have to be 40,075 kilometers long. If you were to take that same rope and place it in a stable position around the Earth such that every point was 1 meter off the ground, it would only have to be 6 meters longer. Now, if you have a basketball and take a rope that tightly wraps around it, then extend it to place to give it 1 meter of space between the surface of the ball and the rope at all points, it would also have to be 6 meters longer. Story 53. The Roman Empire was not an empire. The official title after two consulates were eliminated was August. Their form of rule and administration was nothing like modern empires of Britain or Spain. Who was the first official emperor in history is still highly disputed among us historians between Otto I and Charlemagne. The emperor title seen in the last few centuries in history can only officially be granted by the Pope and no one else, therefore making people like Wilhelm II of Prussia and Napoleon not actual emperors. Emperor is a title given to a monarch by the Pope with the intent of protecting the papal state. Story 54. There are as many positive even numbers as there are positive integers. There are as many positive even numbers greater than 1 million as there are rational numbers, positive or negative. These sets and many others all have aleph null cardinality, so you can create unique pairings between one member of one set to one member of another set, and no member in either set will be double counted or left out. Story 55. Humans have been cooking far longer, almost 10 times longer than our species has existed. Humans are one of the most incredible mimics in the animal kingdom. We can imitate each other, other animals, and machines, and yet we have absolutely no idea why we're so good at vocal mimicry. Humans are one of the best long-distance runners in the animal kingdom. Humans are capable of running down animals in the hot sun. Humans and whales are the only animals that go through menopause. Story 56. The letter J in English starts with a D. Jump, job, jingle, jab, jet, jeep, etc. A D sound is articulated with the tongue tip pressing or flapping against the roof of your mouth directly behind your top teeth while your voice is activated. A T sound is the same, but it has no voice. So when you start saying a J word out loud like jump, notice your tongue starts in the place of articulation for the D or T, but your voice is turned on, so it's a D. Your mouth opens as your jaw or tongue muscles push forward and tense to create air friction, which is needed for the next part of the J sound, voice sh or zh. By the way, a Z sound is just a voiced S. Back to saying jump, after the D and after the ZH, your mouth opens to make room for the vowel. Your voice has been going since you began the word. We're saying jump, so we need room for the Y sound and our tongue relaxes. The Y sound is one of the laziest sounds our mouths can make. Finish off with both lips coming together, voice still vibrating, air exits your nose, and that's the M. Finish with an explosion out those lips, but turn your voice off, otherwise we'll end up saying jum. B is a voiced P. Bonus, some G words are actually J words like Gerald or Jif. Story 57. Federal government debt and deficits are not a measure of something that we owe to an outside entity who acts as a creditor that we owe money to. They are created when the government goes into debt with itself in the process of creating currency, and we reduce that debt when we tax money back out of the economy. An exponentially rising debt and deficit is absolutely essential in order to maintain price levels in an exponentially expanding economy, maintain a modest level of inflation unless the economy severely contracts, or a combination of both. We can never default on our debt unless we make the political decision to stop printing money. Story 58. The Liebeck versus McDonald's case wasn't new for its time. So, you see, in 1994, there had already been numerous cases of McDonald's overheating their coffee, giving the drinkers burns. The thing about Stella's case is that she got third-degree burns, usually reported as third degree on her legs and genitalia, and ended up needing to pay thousands of dollars in medical expenses. Before the lawsuit, McDonald's agreed to pay around $800 or so, which is way less than her medical expenses. She ended up needing skin graft surgery. The reason why this is misconstrued? McDonald's paid thousands of dollars in propaganda and such in order to muddy up the good name of Stella Liebeck to claim that she made a big deal out of getting coffee burns. Keep in mind that the coffee itself was at boiling temperatures. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.